to start, Stephanie. If I could ask everybody to mute, just because we're going to have a lot of people. We have 23 folks on, and I suspect we'll get up to the 28 that registered, and it's just going to get very noisy if you aren't muted. And once again, the link is in the chat to that document, and this is being recorded, and I will circulate this recording and have it, of course, in our archives and have it up on the NWNW site, as well as our YouTube channel within the next 24 or 48 hours. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Stephanie.
Thanks so much, Carl, and thanks everybody for joining. I see this comment from Gary. Can you please establish the timeline for updating bylaws given city requirements are in flux? Yeah, that's an excellent point. What I hope to do today is have an overview of bylaws, neighborhood association bylaws. The template that the city provided, as many of you know, is from 2015. So it's a little bit out of compliance, and there's some internal inconsistencies, and state law has marched along with remote meetings and all kinds of stuff. So I think if we have a general idea, and I know a lot of you already do, about the different sections of the bylaws, the different considerations to have in mind, at least we'll be in a better state. And the thing about bylaws is, for example, if your current bylaws just haven't been looked at for 10 years or so and they need to be updated, they can always be updated, or that process started now and updated again if there's any strong suggestions from the city. We were supposed to, I think, have a template new bylaws by the end of January. I didn't see them. They're not on the website. So I just kind of made my own. And I know Carl asked you to mute, but if as we go along you have questions, please ask them. And I might, if it's getting a little bogged down, I might ask that we hold certain items to the end. But other than that, I think what I'll do is share my screen if I can. Am I allowed to do that, Carl? I'll see.
You should be able to. If not, I will.
Yeah,
are you able?
Okay. Looks like I can. What I want is not that one. What I want is this one. Hold on a sec. Well, I'll do this one first. So if you screen, this is full bylaws that is pretty much unstable edges. Anyway, I don't really want to look today. What I want to look at.
Hey, Stephanie, your audio is breaking up really bad from a number of people. So maybe you could start over about 30 seconds.
Maybe you that is let me stop my video. Sometimes that helps. Is it still bad?
No, I think that's better, actually.
Okay, apologies. So what I think I'll do, what I think I'll do is go through section by section, and we can just have a little discussion about each section. Some of them aren't controversial. Some of them are a lot of options, kind of build your own adventure. Does everybody have their bylaws currently that they have in front of them? Yes, I see some thumbs up. One other thing I'd like is if your neighborhood association is a 501c3, if you can put a Y in the chat, or if it's not, can you put an N in the chat for no? If you're in process, you can write that. That would be great. So I have a good understanding. Thanks. Thanks. I love it. All right. No. Yes. Okay. In the process, Marshall Park, that's right. Okay, this is really helpful. Thank you. That shouldn't make much of a difference for your bylaws, only in the first section. I'm again going to stop my video, share my screen for the annotated part. If you have a question or any discussion items while we're going through, please just, I can't see your hands, but maybe Carl, you can monitor.
Sure thing.
Okay. See my screen?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so there's about, how many sections? 16 different sections. First one, easy, right? What's the name of the organization? You put the name in there. Second section is the purpose and how you include this part, 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. I don't think it hurts to include it, even if you don't currently have tax exempt status or you're not on track to do that. I think it's fine. Anything that you see in this template that's highlighted in yellow is what I'm suggesting adding to the current template. And this is language that that the city wants to have in there. Affect livability, quality, open processes. Can you also put in the chat, or maybe just tell me, because I can't really monitor the chat while I'm sharing my screen, but if anybody doesn't mind typing up and sharing if they use the city's template for their own bylaws, or if they've even seen that template before. Is this new to you guys, or is it old hat? Please share, please tell me.
This is Emily at Marshall Park. It looks like the city one is new only because it's so much longer than ours, but Mike, you might have better information than me. Okay, yeah, Mike says new to Marshall Park.
Well, yeah, the city template is like 50 pages, whereas our little old bylaws is only barely 6 pages.
Did you say 50, Mike? Or
yes, 50. It looked like 50 pages. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the way it was laid out on that link on the city is it had those 3 columns with so much annotation and a lot of white space. So that's why I took it and put it all together in one place so you could see what's the document and what is just kind of comments about the document. So the template that I sent out without the comments and without the annotations is, I want to say,
Looks like it's 35 pages.
That's the one that has the comments and annotations that I sent out, but the one that doesn't have any of that, the one I was looking at before, is 14 pages. So with all of the blue stuff taken out, I think Carl sent that one out. So just the black text and the yellow highlight without all the blue options and comments. So it's about 14 pages if you adopt the template, which you probably won't. You'll probably have some tweaks, but I think it's helpful to see it all together. Okay. Any other comments about this template, whether it's new to you or you've used it in the past? I don't know that the word got out so much that this template was even in existence. Any other thoughts on that?
There are a couple comments in the chat, Stephanie. FSW used the city template to update in 2016. Multnomah NA overhauled a bylaws last year based on the ONE template at the advice of member Amanda Fritz. FPNAs are very old, predate the city template. And a lot of people who say Hayhurst based it on the city template, and a lot of people have indicating this is new.
Okay, wonderful. So it's quite a variety. I think it's good to just look at them anyway, even if you did base them on the current template. It sounds like it's about half and half. So here are the general purposes that you probably would want to include in your bylaws. Maintain open lines of communication, inform residents of events and plans, and then this catch-all F for other such purposes as approved by the board or the membership. And then the annotations, again, this is the city annotations in that large 50-page document. Has some different options. I just kind of combine them in a highlighted proposal up above about generally, yes, we are going to be a nonprofit and we're going to follow the law that can apply to nonprofits. And then it says additional purposes could be added if you have any special interest going on in your neighborhood. I don't think that's any controversial. Again, I don't know how to, I rather should say, oh yes, I can see the chat up here, never mind. But it's kind of hard for me to toggle. So if there's anything that you want to say, if you wouldn't mind just speaking out, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, Eva Kuntis, I believe from Goose Hollow, said, are you recommending that we use the city template? And Joyce also asked, shared a link. Is this where we can look for the template, Portland government bylaws template and articles of incorporation? That's the link you shared earlier, correct?
Yeah, that's the link I shared earlier. Thank you so much, Joyce, for putting that in the chat again. What I'm recommending at this point, and then, like I said, the template is kind of choose your own adventure. So it's the bare bones minimum is the black text, and then it's got some other options that you'll want to go back as a group and say, do we prefer this or do we prefer that? What works best for us for a lot of the options that they provide? And if there are any specific options that you want to talk through, I'm happy to do that. And again, the part that I put in yellow is not, except for this one, of course, about the boundaries. The other parts that are highlighted in yellow are not in the template, but it's additional language that I would recommend. The boundaries, again, some of these are shifting around right now, but ONE standards does require that the boundaries are described in detail for Article 3. Article 4 is who are your members? Who's your voting membership? So So here is one. Let's see if I can move this. So these are residents, property owners, and individuals, business licenses located in the boundaries are eligible to be a member of the association. So this is the bare minimum, but you can also expand that. You can expand it to nonprofits. You can have youth. That's why this is highlighted, 18 years or older. You could go as young as 16, or you could have youth advisory boards. But there is a concern about liability if that is the case. Does anybody have membership for youth when you're defining your membership roles? Or is anybody under 18? No, thank you, Eva, thank you. Considered having student representatives, okay. You can, and here's a little write-up about the different considerations for that. There is no age restriction for serving on a board in Oregon. But if there is any liability, it would be on the parent or guardian of that youth. And normally, we're not going to see that much liability, but that is a consideration. And there is this requirement, at least currently, that members need to provide consent to be in the association. We don't sign people up to be members against their will, right? And there's different considerations here about the timing. You can say they become a member, like having a, not a cooling off period, but sometime, what some nonprofits find with membership is membership drive kind of stacks or right before an election or something like that. And it can be disruptive of business. So you can choose to delay the start of their membership a number of days or weeks after they joined. You can have term limits to clean up your membership role. Say your term as a member is for 2 years, and then they have to kind of re-consent after that. How many of you have board policies about describing who is a member and how people become members and kind of opt in and how lists are maintained? Does anyone want to share what's working well?
Todd?
Todd.
I would say, we have, I don't know if it's an issue or not, but once you are a member, there's no way to not be a member unless you move out and then self-report that you're no longer a member. But we have a lot of people that signed up and clearly have forgotten, aren't going to notify us that they moved out. So we have, an ever-growing list of names, and no one ever gets culled from that list. So I'm wondering about your thoughts there.
Yeah, and that is in the narrative there. That is a concern if you're just growing, and it's not really a fresh list necessarily. So having membership terms can be something to consider so that they have to re-sign up after a certain amount of time.
Eva asked a question: if an association wanted, could you become a member immediately with proof of qualification, example, at the annual meeting? And then Mike Charles, we'll get to your question in 1 second.
Yeah, Eva, that is common. So that'll be a decision by the neighborhood association. Just you can either become a member at the annual meeting, or if there's a cutoff date, a certain number of days before the annual meeting, and then they're a member after the meeting. So that's just something to keep in mind. That would be the board's choice.
There's a couple other comments in the chat maybe we could do. Hayhurst, this is from Hayhurst. Our current policy allows all residents, business, and nonprofit representatives to be members without specific consent.
Yeah, that is not allowed. And consent can be by a sign-in sheet, check the box, reply to an email. There's different ways that consent can happen. Is there a way to remove a member? Great question, Carol. We'll get to that in a minute.
And how does this apply to subscribing or non-subscribing neighborhood associations at the coalition board level?
Yeah, tonight we're just talking about neighborhood association bylaws.
And Mike has his hand up.
Yes, Mike, you've had your hand up a while.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I'm from Marshall Park. We're a small neighborhood, so we have to kind of streamline everything we do. And just to follow up on what an earlier gentleman said, we actually keep our membership list and our email list one and the same thing. So the way we find out that people don't want to be members is when they contact me and say, hey, get me off your email list. And that seems to work. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah,
And,
I think that's an interesting process, and I might suggest that you formalize that in a procedure and talk it through. How do these become? How is this reflective of the actual members in the neighborhood association? Is this a good way or not? I don't know the answer to that.
I think one thing I picked up is that we don't currently have a consent section in our bylaws, and maybe that's a good thing for us to add. So thank you for that.
Claire has her hand up, and then Thomas after.
Thank you. Claire. Claire, if you're muted, I can't hear you.
Claire, you're muted. Okay, well, Thomas?
Yeah, so our membership qualification section says requests for membership shall be in writing or by email and shall include name, address, telephone number, and email address. So they're required to fill out a request. Is that not enough for what you're, saying we need to do for consent? I think if someone chooses to fill something out, that's pretty obvious, but is that not clear enough for what you are saying we need?
It's clear enough to me. I think it's clear
Okay.
enough to you. Yeah. It's just not, let's say, having a list and putting people down and having people be members and they have no idea. So if they're
Right.
applying to be a member,
We don't sign you up. You sign yourself up.
right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you.
And Kevin?
Hi, thank you. We don't have anything specifically defined for that. We separate out really who can participate and vote and be a part of meetings versus who's on the board. I guess I'm confused. Why do we need to have, because ours is open to anyone who lives or works in Arbor Lodge. Why would we need to have them officially sign up to say I'm a resident and I want to participate?
Yeah, and just tell me again if I need to turn the video off. That's an excellent question. We can't have an undefined membership list. We actually need to know the names and contact information.
Claire, you're breaking up. I'm sorry, Stephanie, you're breaking up.
Okay, no more on my face. Is that better, Carl?
Yeah,
Much better.
it's much better.
Okay, all right, no video, sorry. When we talk about members, we are talking about those people other than the board of directors who have a vote. Specifically with neighborhood associations, these are folks who meet the criteria and live or have property, or business owners, however the criteria are that you identify, and they can vote mostly to appoint your board. So if they are participating, we don't just say all people, you can say that all people that meet those criteria are eligible for membership, but in order to actually count them on your membership list, then they need to consent.
So
And-
if someone doesn't consent, does that mean they can't participate in our events, our volunteer activities, our meetings?
Oh, no, of course they can participate. When we're talking about membership again, I just want to make a distinction that we're talking about people entitled to a vote at a membership meeting.
Got it. Okay.
I apologize if that was not clear.
Okay,
Yeah, all
perfect.
of these
Thank you.
people, yeah. So who has voting rights, basically, and how you determine who has voting rights is have a list. It should be able to be converted alphabetically, and it should be pretty current, and you should have a process on how you make that determination of who is a current member. Do they have a term? Have they consented? Oh, Claire, you're back. Good.
Yeah, Claire?
Okay, I got it to work now. Sorry about that. One of the things that Bridal Mile does is we like to have our members at least attend one meeting a year, and then they're entitled to vote, because we had problems with people coming on and wanting to vote and never come to a meeting. So we require that they attend one meeting a year in order for them to vote. And that helps also keep an active membership list too. Because we go through the membership list every year, and if somebody hasn't participated in one meeting, then they're not allowed to vote. I don't know if that's, I mean, we've done that and it seems to work for us.
That sounds to me like a really smart screening tool. So how is that practice or process codified in your bylaws, or do you have a separate membership policy, or where do you write that down, or is it just kind of the practice?
We did have it codified, and then we kind of opened it up more, and then we got into the problem of people coming on and we didn't even know who they were. And so then that's what we're going to continue to do now with our new bylaws that we're going to be updating, is just qualify it again, because we want everybody to be able to come and vote. But so that we know who is going to be voting, they at least have to attend one. So it used to be that way, it was taken out, and now we're going to be putting it back in, because it helps us know who's at the meetings. And that way it keeps people from coming in and taking over a board, because if anybody can come in and they haven't even attended any meetings, and a group of people come in and they just take everything over, it just kind of keeps everything, you know, within the scope of everybody knows who's at the meetings. And if you've been at a meeting, because we have a sign-up sheet for every meeting.
Yeah, I really like that practice. Right, go ahead.
And it also, on the meeting, it gives it you check off a consent. So we pass the sign-up sheet around, and then it gives consent so that we can send them if they want to be on the email list or not. Because some people don't want to be on the email list, but they want to know what's happening. So it sometimes can be tricky. But that's how Bridal Mile's done it.
So Stephanie, there are a couple comments from questions from Joyce in the chat regarding coalition bylaws. It's my understanding that we're just dealing with neighborhood association bylaws today. Should coalition bylaws be allowed for non-subscribers to have the same member privileges as subscribers? And if district coalition has non-subscribing NAs, is the district coalition representing those NA members without their express consent, or receiving funding for those NAs without their entitlement to a vote? And so is that fodder for a different training.
Yeah, those are really great questions. I don't want to get too far afield today, but we can certainly noodle on that afterwards, Joyce, if you like.
And Carol from Forest Park actually suggested that I walk through what NWNW and, you know, knock on wood, if we can do this, my hope is that we can, how member records are handled currently with Neighbors West Northwest Coalition partners. Could I take a minute to do that? So
is this at the coalition level, or is this at the
no? This is at the neighborhood level.
Okay.
So yeah, folks. So any of the current NWNW coalition partners, if you go to your websites and click become a member, that will go to an Airtable form, which lists currently all 11 neighborhoods. The neighborhood selects, or the citizen selects their neighborhood, their address, enters their information in, and it gets put into an Airtable and like a database, basically. And that is where that information is housed. And at the end of filling out that form, the confirmation message at the end, it directs those new members to actually sign up for your MailChimp. So then it ports them over to be able to sign up for your newsletter if they choose to. They don't have to, but it's certainly more convenient for them if they do. So if you have questions about your member records, particularly around voting time, we just scrubbed these for Old Town. They're in you can reach out to me and I'm happy to share your membership records with you. I'm happy to help scrub them if you need. I can answer any questions around that. Okay.
Carl, this is Eva. I think that this is a perfect time for me to ask our question. Unfortunately, we've been working on our bylaws for about 3 months. Had I known you were having this presentation, I could have saved us a bunch of time at Goose Hollow. But as I understand it, the list that you're talking about, Carl, for us has like about 1,400 members. And so when we were doing our bylaws, we struggled mightily with the 5%, which is like 59 people, which we'll never get at an annual meeting, and wanted to come up with a number. I saw that there were a number of places that just said a majority could vote, the whole quorum issue, or some put the number 10, some 20. So having a good membership list is really important, but I understood that NWNW couldn't do that kind of culling for us. So we were thinking, well, should we send out an email? Or, I mean, I don't know how to get an accurate list for that number of people.
Well, I don't think your numbers are quite right here. Let's see. Goose Hollow, I'm looking at your memberships right now. And oh, you are correct. It's 1,137 folks.
So what's the recommendation for we can? I mean, we don't have the bandwidth to create a membership staff, and neither does Neighbors West Northwest, as I understood it.
So the issue is that you have too many members who are eligible to vote to maintain that list?
That's the issue. And then we don't have a system for taking people off when they're no longer living in the neighborhood or, don't qualify.
Well, from an IT perspective, Stephanie, you would have to chime in here from a legal perspective, but from a IT systems perspective, it's pretty simple. We could just do something like download that database of all those people, their first, last name, and their email, and then import it into MailChimp as a segment of your contacts, and send them out an email saying renew your membership with this form, or you'll be taken off our records. I mean,
There sort of has to, there has to be something in the bylaws that says you're gonna, you know, you have the authority to do that. You can't just say that because you want to call the list.
You could
again, Todd, I'm saying
refer
from an
in
IT perspective, that
Yeah, I worry about that too, because everybody doesn't do email, first of all.
Yeah, and we want to have that accessibility for people who don't do email. So a mailing, whatever people have indicated when they opt in, what their preference is for how you communicate with them. So if your bylaws, for example, refer to a membership policy, you could generate that policy. Or if you amend your bylaws, mostly when membership organizations amend their bylaws on matters that have to do with the rights of members, then the membership itself needs to update those sections. They need to approve those sections. Quorum, like the number of people, that's not, that's been found to not be a right of the member. That's just the number of people needed to conduct any business. And in terms of your quorum question, I do like something I read in Robert's rules is when you're picking a number or a percentage, what's the number of people who are likely to show up on a rainy day? So your history and rounding down a little bit, you know, if people have adequate notice and you've got a fair number, and it may be that just that number of people, let's say you say 20 people, and that's the quorum. So the number of people who need to show up in order to conduct any business. And then oftentimes it's a majority of those people.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is this membership list and how to determine membership, how to have a clean policy, how long are people's membership, how are they informed of what their rights are. This is a ripe area for discussion, and possibly maybe, I think Darlene's on the call. This might be something for TA, some technical assistance for the neighborhoods on maybe an audit on how they're doing that and what some best practices are. So let's put a pin in this, but just so you know that this is an area, because you will want to be able to maintain a membership list, know everybody who's got the right to vote and they're eligible to do that. And that if somebody asks for that, a member asks for the list, you've got to be able to produce it in alphabetical order. That's in the ORS 65. So yeah, you need to know who can vote at a membership meeting, who to send formal notice to when there is a meeting coming up, and if a member asks to see it, they've got that statutory right. Okay. Yeah, and sometimes, you know, I really like, was it Claire, if you've got a meeting and you've got sign-in sheets, you can check a box that kind of verifying that they are eligible to be a member. Sometimes you have people bring their business license or a piece of mail, utility mail, something like that, if you want to verify that. But putting that parameter so you can get that list together is important. So you've got that roster. I feel like we could talk about this for a long time, but I do want to move on. Unless there's any other burning questions. Let me check the chat. And she let us know. Yeah, it's Joyce, thank you for the question. Member-based organizations, that's in ORS 65. Chapter 65 has all of the membership rules, and that it's just kind of common sense in order to know who to send notice to and who can vote. You need to know who the people are. Okay, section 3. We don't ask for dues or fees of our members. that's prohibited by the ONI standards, at least as they stand from what, 20. The ONI standards, when were those?
Question.
Yeah.
Question on that, Stephanie. Is that only for citizens? I'm aware of like the OTCA requires dues dues for their subscribing businesses and property owners.
That's a good question. So the template or the commentary here says that dues are prohibited by the ONI standards. I've got the ONI standards in front of me. Those are from 2005, not 2015, even though the template was from 2015. I see your hand up, Thomas. Let me just look at that. Dues is on page 10 of the ONI guidelines. Did you have a question, Thomas, or something to add?
I do. Well, you said that we're are we in section 3, section 5? I guess, I'm looking at my bylaws, it's Article 5. Is it financial support? I'm just not sure where are we? Could we say section 3? That's confusing. I thought we had covered section 3 boundaries.
That's Article 3. So if you look at the table of contents, we're on Article 4, voting membership. We're still on Article 4 and now section 3 of Article 4.
Right. I'm trying to look at 3 documents and reconcile them. So
yeah.
Okay.
If you want to look at the one that Carl, and I think Joyce put that in the chat also. No, Joyce put the one, Carl put that in the chat early on, is the one that I'm looking at. That is the template plus.
Yeah, I'm dropping it in again, so it's at the bottom of the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, just logistically, I have only so much screen space. I'm trying to look from one to the other. So this.
I know. That's why I consolidated.
Calling one thing an article, a section. I mean, it's hard to navigate.
I know. Tell me about it. That's why I consolidated them in the first place. I couldn't keep toggling back and forth. So yeah, we're still talking about the overall article of voting membership, and within that article, there are 5, a proposed 6 different sections under that article. So in the ONI standards, on page 10, it says neighborhood associations cannot require collection of membership dues. Contributions made on a voluntary basis may be accepted. So
I'll let OTCA know.
okay. You can strongly request their contributions or voluntary dues, but you can't mandate it as far as I can see. And it's verified, etc., has 1 vote. And again, what the members are generally entrusted with is voting on who is on the board in any very large decision affecting the organization itself. So still on Article 4, now Section 5, we've got the powers. And the template says each member is eligible to vote for the election of board of directors, bylaw amendments, and dissolution, consolidation, or merger. I think I added consolidation in there. And I propose adding that they do not have the power to make binding or enforcing decisions on matters that are reserved by the board, like adopting budgets, etc. And then there's a nice little narrative from the city about who's in control of the major decisions of the organization. So it's got to be the board of directors. And that's a little bit of a tension there, right? Because we do want the membership to be involved and participate. But when it comes to voting, it's really on a few areas only. This, yeah. So this next section is a section that I propose is added. Because the current template refers to, oh, it would be a good idea to have a code of conduct to make sure if you are going to remove people and to remind people to not be disruptive, etc. So this is some proposed language here that any of the organizations can look at, adopt, refine, take away as you wish. Mostly what ONI and I think the associations are most interested in is refraining from behavior that could disrupt proceedings, personal attacks, discriminatory comments, or obstruction of the organization's operations, and just overall high ethical conduct. Any question on that proposed addition?
Does then the W bylaws adopted in February 2024 reflect these suggestions? Can we use it as a model for these revisions?
The NW bylaws are different. These bylaws are strictly for neighborhood associations. I feel like the district/coalition bylaws need an overhaul, and the current version is like an interim and in-between version until the new structure is in place. It's kind of been built on, and I'm guessing that within a year it will be revised again. There might be some elements in here that are useful, and there certainly are ONI standards that apply just to the district coalitions, but they're kind of apples and oranges.
And Thomas has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm just on the code of conduct. We don't have anything similar. Is this a compliance problem if we don't add code of conduct language, or is this more of a best practice?
That's a great question. I don't think it's a compliance issue. The board will always have that right, and the membership has the right to remove members who are not fulfilling. Remember, I don't know who of you were there with my board governance training when we talked about the 3 legal duties of diligence/due care, loyalty, and obedience to law. So if a board member or another member or anybody is not complying or discharging those legal duties, then there already is in the law that right to remove them. But this is just a reminder and something that you can point to if you need that. I do think it is best practice. Yeah. And that the narrative, the annotations refers to a code of conduct, but it doesn't have any sample language. So that's why I put that in there. Yeah, exactly, Claire. ONI standards are still in effect. Yep, they are still in effect. And they know that they're outdated, and they know that they're internally inconsistent and that there's some problems. They're aware of them. But you're right. I think they should put a moratorium on certain sections of them until such time as this whole shakeup happens.
And then Carol has a question. Are all members necessarily representatives of the NA? And who judges what is a discriminatory comment or obstruction?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and that would be up to the finder of fact, generally speaking. The finder of fact is whoever is making that determination when there's a request to remove somebody, and we don't want things to be so vague that there's accusations flying back and forth. The point of it is to have good discussion, entertain opposing views, be respectful. And if somebody's being truly disparaging or abusive or disruptive beyond, passionate discourse, then there should be a mechanism to remove them. There is already one in the law, but having this codified a little bit, and this is just sample language that, again, you can take back to your neighborhood association, talk it through, like, what does that mean? And kind of poke it apart, pull it apart.
And one other question, can code of conduct be added as an addendum, or is it so static it belongs in bylaws?
Yeah, well, that is up to the discretion of the board. You could have separate board policies and have a code of conduct or membership policies. You could either have that in or outside of the bylaw. Okay, so are we ready to move on? Oh wait, was it chat? Doesn't code of conduct need to be signed annually by directors? Well, if they are adopting bylaws changes that have code of conduct provision, they are agreeing to it. But the board can decide to have separate kind of standalone code of conduct if it feels that that is necessary and desirable in the best interest of the organization. Okay, Article 5, Board of Directors. I like having this range right now. It proposes to have a range that you can have between 3 and blank. This statutory minimum directors is 3 in Oregon. There is no maximum, but I wouldn't go crazy. I wouldn't have more than, I don't know, 7 or 9 at the most, but does anybody have any comments on the number? And the range is nice, just because you can, if you say we need 5 directors, then somebody resigns or moves or something happens, then you've only got 4, then you're out of compliance with your bylaws. Whereas if you have a range, that minimum of 3, you're not out of compliance with your bylaws if it ebbs and flows naturally.
2 questions. Or I guess actually only one. Shall we distinguish between voting and non-voting directors here?
Oh, you stymied me because all directors are voting directors. I'm not sure I understand the question. And aren't you required to have a minimum of 3? Yes, you absolutely are required. And that says that in the annotation and in the template here. Minimum of 3, maximum of, there is no maximum. All board members are voting members. If you are elected to govern the nonprofit, you are charged with governance, and part of that governance is to vote. There are no non-voting members. Todd, yes, I see your hand.
So the geographic district seems like it's sort of getting complicated at that point, because then you have to draw boundaries, I assume, and then figure out who in your membership lives in the boundaries, so only they can vote for those particular seats, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, that is an option. It might be attractive to some neighborhood associations, but I'm all for simplification. If you don't need to do that, if there's no good reason to do that, and I don't know, there may be, but that is an option to consider that you have different like area representatives, and yeah, that would add a layer of extra verification.
And
Are there, oh, sorry, are there any restrictions as far as to how creative you could get on carving out different, I mean, could you say like, well, we want a diversity component, and what are the limitations other than sort of anti-discrimination laws as far as what you can draw up to what kind of characteristic a particular seat can have on the board?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you said other than discrimination, I haven't seen anything other than district in terms of, in terms of I haven't seen anything other than geographical districts to kind of break apart membership. You could add different classes somehow. Oh no, we're at board of directors. No, I wouldn't want to mess with that at all.
And we have two other questions from Joyce. Do most chairs vote or only vote in case of a tie? And could youth reps be non-voting directors?
If you're a director, you're a voting director. You can have a youth like advisory committee, but if you're on the board of directors, you have a vote. You can't not vote.
And do most chairs vote or only vote in the case of a tie? Or
that could be up to the board's discretion. Most boards that I work with, the chair votes also.
And could using voting versus non-voting allow for quorum management and advisory support?
I don't understand the question. If you're on the board, you have a vote. Okay, Joyce, do you want to elaborate on that?
You already answered it, that youth reps would be in the advisory space.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that would be a nice advisory committee to have. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we want to make sure to say there that you have to be a member. You have to actually live there, right? Or qualify for membership to be on the board of directors. I think that goes without saying. Then with the terms of your board members, your directors, there are some options here to have 1-year terms, 2-year terms. You can have longer terms. I like shorter terms and no term limits personally, because you get a shorter commitment from people and they're more likely to agree to serve. But some people find that if it's just 1 year, then you lose that institutional memory. So that's something to really discuss. So here's some options with term limits, without term limits, meaning you can only run or serve for 3 terms, for example, and then you have to take a break. That allows for new blood on the board, but sometimes it also throws the baby out with the bathwater, and it's like forcing somebody off the board who's really a great leader. So there is that decision for each board to make. And I like the way that this annotation describes kind of the tension there. And you can stagger or not. Okay, this section on removal, I added resignation and removal because I didn't see any other provision in this template that had to do with resignation. It's not controversial. This is how you resign. That's statutory. It has to be in writing. It has to be delivered. I also, and right now it says, the template says that any director can be removed with or without cause by a majority of members at a membership meeting. I'm sorry, I gotta scroll. Yeah. I'm proposing this language. I've seen it, a lot of other boards use language like this, that directors can be removed for behavior that grossly violates the code of conduct or significantly impedes the operations of the organization, making sure there's a thorough investigation. Only because it can be tricky to gather a membership meeting. If there's somebody who is so disruptive to the organization and you want them removed, it can be tricky to remove them and call a membership meeting, because the membership has the right to appoint, so they also have the right to remove. But we do want to build in that protection for the board to be able to remove members for really egregious actions. And we don't, like we talked about before, not just for differences of opinion, or I don't like what you're saying, but really, really gross violation.
And two questions. What is an example of without cause in this situation? And does that mean no grievance process?
Correct. Without cause means just because, and yeah, without a grievance process. They have the power to appoint, they have the power to remove the membership itself. And directors, we have a little bit higher bar there for them to make that removal decision in a membership organization. There is this optional language that I like, removal for non-attendance. And if you went to my governance training, it's not mean to ask somebody to resign or vote to remove them if they stop attending the board meetings. It's protecting them, it's protecting the organization from liability, because they're not literally fulfilling their duties. So I do like this option if you want to add that right in. And you could have, instead of 2/3, you could have majority vote. I think this takes away membership. Anyway, this is something that you guys can discuss about what works for you. Like the annotation says, it's hard for the organization to conduct business when people don't attend meetings chronically. So then it is best to, have that conversation with them, see what's happening. If they still don't come, no shame, right? Sometimes life happens. But removal is not mean. It's perfectly appropriate. I like this reminder: conflict between directors is not by itself a justification for removing directors. Always want to have those collaborative, constructive conversations. Oh yeah, and this is where it talks about establishing a code of conduct, which we proposed earlier. It says it again: just because we disagree, we're not going to remove you. But if they're consistently disruptive or damaging, then it is appropriate. Any questions on removal or resignation? And I do, but sometimes I can see that, oh, I've got my chat bar goes away. I've got to go and find
Yeah,
it.
there's nothing in the chat, no questions.
Okay, so the next section is on board vacancies, and I just added whether they're created by removal, resignation, ineligibility, or incapacity, or death. So if there's a vacancy, then the rest of the directors can fill that vacancy. And then, yeah, and then they're going to serve until the next election. Then there's some options on having that vacancy be filled at the next general membership meeting. That can be disruptive of business, and you can, to force a whole special election every time there's a vacancy, that can be also disruptive. So this allows, if there is a vacancy kind of midterm that the board can fill that, but certainly you as a board can choose to go another way. Oh my, I hear you. All right, so powers and duties of the board. This is assuring that all the business of all the affairs of the association. I added in here, sorry, I have to scroll down to see it, including proper financial management and controls, because that's to me one of the most important things.
Stephanie, there's a question. Well, Mike Charles says, if I remove people for not attending meetings, there would be no one left. Ha ha ha. But from Joyce, can the board fill an elected officer position without an election? I believe you just addressed that, but.
Yeah, that would be up to the board in its bylaws, whether or not that vacancy can be filled kind of midterm, or whether it decides it wants to hold another election or not wait until the next election. Claire, I just propose adding this other little sentence down here, that the board members have to diligently prepare for, attend, participate in the board and committee meetings as needed, exercising due care. Just reiterating that legal duty that you have when you sign up to govern a nonprofit. Whether you're elected or appointed by the board, you've got the same powers and responsibilities. And here's some other options in here. And I like the discussion here about wanting to ensure the participatory culture of neighborhood associations. What some groups do, and you can tell me what you do and whether it works, is to have a membership meeting where you poll the membership, you ask for concerns, and have that right before the board meeting if there's items to vote on. Okay.
Mike Charles has a question. Is there a place for financial requirements, such as all payments must be approved by at least 2 directors?
You know, that's a great question. I was going to add in a whole financial section, because it's pretty silent as to that. But I would recommend that not each neighborhood association adopt a fiscal policy. So it does have those checks and balances in place. That's a great question. So do any of you do that, have your membership meetings? And I'm not talking about your annual membership meeting, but maybe a town hall type meeting where you gather information, you get a discussion going, and then you right before your regular board meeting. Does that happen?
Thomas? You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we start our meetings with a general membership meeting, and then that adjourns, and then we go into our board of directors meeting. That's what we typically do.
That sounds like a good model. Is that working well for you?
I think so, yeah.
And Joyce has a question. Should financial controls be held in standing rules document?
Standing rule. Well, I would say most nonprofits have policies. You could call them standing rules. You could have, yeah, financial controls policy. I would highly recommend that. Yeah.
And Marita says Hayhurst alternates every other month between general membership and board meetings.
Great. Great. Okay, so we are moving on to officers. And I do
One other question. Would love to know if NAs generally have 2 signers on bank accounts.
what a lot. Oh, I can't speak to NAs specifically, but maybe somebody else can. But often with nonprofit boards, that one person or 2 people will be designated check signers, but 2 people would have to sign if over a certain amount. And that certain amount can be $500, it could be $1,000, it could be $10,000, whatever. It seems like a large enough amount to the board according to your budget. So I think it's pretty common. If anybody wants to chime in there, if that's your practice.
Two with
So
at Hillside, 2 with the signature. Sorry, authority at Hillside.
Great. I would like to pick up the pace a little bit unless people are willing to stick around until 8, because we have a little bit more to cover. We're only about halfway through. So I'm gonna.
Stephanie, would you suggest that I shut down the chat? Not shut it down, but stop taking questions so until the end at this point?
Yeah, why don't, if we're gonna go to 7:30, why don't we, I'll just let me know when it's about 7:25. So I'll go about 10 more minutes, and then just if you can note your question and we'll answer questions then, I think that would be helpful.
Great.
That work? Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So the next article is on officers. So this is just fill in the blank. Who are your officers? And we are saying that they need to be board members in order to be officers. It's not technically required under Oregon law. Like you can have a secretary who's not on the board, but it just makes it more convenient and clear oftentimes to make sure to have your officers also be directors. Yeah, we do recommend that a treasurer is also appointed. Some NAs have vice presidents, some have chairs, some have other roles. You can have co-chairs. That's all fine. It really is up to the discretion of the organization, as long as you have a president and a secretary to fill out those state forms. The terms of office, and remember, you can be a board member for however many years you're elected or appointed to serve. And then you can kind of play musical hats within your board for your officer position. So you can be a board member and then be secretary one year, president the next. Doesn't really matter, but you can change that in your bylaws. So here's some options. You can have term limits or no term limits. You can have 1 year or longer years. It's pretty straightforward. Vacancy, if you have a vacancy in your officer position, let's say somebody can resign, let's say a secretary, but stay on the board, but they've resigned their officer position, but not their board position, for example, then you've got a vacancy in that officership. So those secretarial duties need to be covered by somebody else, and the board should vote on who's doing that. The next section has to do with, these are kind of generic. And again, if it's just black and white, this is the current template for the city of Portland. These are the duties of president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. There is this position of officer position of neighborhood coalition / district. I think I added / district delegate. Another option is co-chairs, and this describes some of the tension that can happen if you do have co-chairs. How do they make decisions? Is it consensus? Does one of them decide if the other's not available? So these are good discussion points when you bring this back to your board. This is a good discussion about treasurer, how you ideally want at least 2 directors involved in financial transactions. And we talked about in that governance training, making sure that no one person is in charge of all 3 phases of a financial transactions life cycle. So one person isn't approving a transaction, executing the transaction, so writing the check and tracking it, like on QuickBooks. That can really set up organizations for financial trouble. Okay. The next article is on committees, and the board can establish committees, determine the scope of it. You can have a standing committee that's always going to be meeting or always in play, or you can determine an ad hoc committee if there's a special project, something that's more short term. You can assemble an ad hoc committee to address that shorter term concern. Normally this committee is going to be advisory, right? They don't have authority. What this template doesn't really break down, which I probably should have broken down, is the difference between board level committees and non-board level committees. This is fine the way they put it. It's advisory. We were talking about maybe having that, the youth as an advisory committee. There's different ways on who can be appointed the members, whether that's the president or chair, how open it is, how many directors you want to serve on each committee. Generally speaking, you do want at least 1 board member on each advisory committee to serve like as a liaison to report back to the board. This section 3, committees with board authority. Generally speaking, this is going to be your executive committee, but these are committees that you specifically, that the board specifically delegates to take action in between regular board meetings. And also because neighborhood associations are quasi-governmental, you are going to be subject to some of those public meeting laws that you're pretty familiar with. And here's some example language on how the executive committee is formed. I would myself want to beef up this language where it says the executive committee shall be composed of, basically the officers. I would want to say what they're empowered to do, what they're not empowered to do. And this is important too. If you're going to give a committee like an executive committee broad authority, you want to look at your articles of incorporation to make sure that that is not in conflict with that. Okay, this is kind of reinforces what we said before, that we don't want to that these committees can't take certain actions. Yes, Todd.
I just want a quick warning about having a committee with executive, board level powers, is that you can easily end up with a monster with 2 heads, and sort of, we had and currently have that issue where we have a very powerful planning committee that can act on behalf of the board and is sort of, in some ways, a separate but equal NWDA. So it's very challenging to have 2 entities that are speaking for the same organization, basically.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with you. I think a lot of people like the idea of executive committees, but then when they actually see them in action, unless they're really clearly delineated, like we want the executive committee to review this and report back Yeah, it's a tricky, this is a whole discussion for another day, but I agree, and I think others can learn from that warning a little bit. Like, make sure that you know who your executive committee is, that they're not empowered to do more than they should be empowered to do, and that the whole board is actually governing and not delegating its governance responsibilities to a smaller number of people. Okay. Meetings, this is pretty straightforward, I think. Okay, Mike, tell me.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Just a quick question. Now, let me be clear. We don't have to have an executive committee, right? I mean, I don't want to overcomplicate this. Is that okay?
Yeah, what I propose is having in your bylaws that you may establish an executive committee. And then if you have the need for it, you can by resolution as a board establish and empower an executive committee. But if you have it there in your bylaws that you have that authority to do that, then you can do it. Otherwise, yeah, you can just take it out of your bylaws if you think it's more hassle than it's worth. The meeting section, Article 8. These are for annual membership meetings, your annual meeting, your regular meeting, your special meetings. I did want to add that if you are giving notice for special membership meeting, it's got to specify the purpose for which it's held. You can't just say, all right, members, we're having a special membership meeting in 30 days, especially if it's about the bylaws. According to statute, you've actually got to say what exactly is proposed to be changed. And I did want to update this, that it doesn't have to be mail, should be on multiple platforms. I think this is in conflict with the ONI standards though, so we might want to look at that. The ONI standards, you know, I think they were written in 2005, and since then quite a few things have happened with remote meetings and electronic notice and all that. So I think this is something that they're looking at. You could say that annual meeting is going to be set for season. I like to say first quarter of the year, fourth quarter of the year, you know, season or quarter. This part in their annotation, I'd want to double check. And I didn't have time to do that. I apologize.
Hey, Stephanie, we're at 7:25, just a heads up.
Okay, any questions so far? Or, you know, when I originally had this in my calendar, I didn't realize it was an hour and a half, and I didn't realize there'd be so many great questions. Can we get a poll if you want to keep going, or if you want to just wrap it up and ask some questions? I'll take your direction.
Folks, give a thumbs up if you want to continue. We have 3, 4 thumbs up. That's
We have
not
some keep going, some got to drop off. It's being recorded. Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep on this pace, and if you drop off, I understand. And if you've got, or no, let's ask any questions right now for those of you who have to leave. If you have any burning questions.
Stephanie, this is Darlene.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, I was wondering, is it possible to have folks go back to their board, start looking at their bylaws and changes, and then schedule another meeting, maybe a couple of weeks down the road after they've been able to digest what you've taught them this afternoon?
Well, I guess that's why you're the boss, Darlene. That makes a lot of sense. Why don't I just buzz through in 1 minute, go through the proposed changes that I have to the template And I can
Okay.
put the justification, but yeah, if you guys can look at this, especially this document, I think it's helpful because it's got it all in one. The one with the blue highlighted, the blues and the highlights. Okay. This part, just deliberation and decision making was pretty skimpy. So, and it didn't have email voting, and there's a whole statutory process. It is in conflict with the ONI standards. So that's something we want to maybe confer with them. I'll talk with Darlene about that. They really need to update their process. The written ballot. I mean, a lot of people are using like Election Buddy or other electronic platforms. So this is compliant with Oregon nonprofit law, but it's inconsistent with the ONI standards, which is a little frustrating. Remote meetings, again, this is a little bit in conflict, but it is legal. Email decisions also, same thing. This is the process for sending out an email, a request for an electronic vote that's in the statute. It's helpful to have it codified in your bylaws because that's a nice place to look at. No proxy voting. I think it does say this elsewhere, but just a reminder that and proxy voting doesn't mean what people think it means, like, oh, I'm going to give you my vote. I can't make it. You have to vote how I would want. Proxy vote means you're giving somebody your vote and they can vote however they want. No, if you are a board member, if you are a member and you're charged with voting, you have to use your own vote, not by proxy, which is different than voting by mail. The proxy is somebody else's vote. Elections. Sorry, guys. Grievance process. Well, that's a whole other discussion, but this is the process that the ONI standards does recommend, and here's the annotations in there. Indemnity, it's nice to have in there. It's probably in your articles of incorporation. I did add some proposed paragraphs on conflict of interest.
Stephanie, Mike has a question. Did I see a comment that Robert's rules is too complex / formal for NAs?
Yeah, for sure. Most non giant parliamentary groups don't abide by Robert's Rules of Order, but some kind of simplified procedure. There's, I think, it's the Martha's Rules of Order. Anyway, there's a bunch of ones. That this is, I just want to finish these 2 sections and then we can open this up again. Non-discrimination. This is a placeholder for some kind of inclusivity section. I've heard some people talk about and concerned about. So, and also accessibility, to make sure that we are being accessible to community members, whether public meetings or electronic, and to make sure that there's some plan to reach the most amount of people as possible. I don't know if you want to add this or not, but I like seeing these pop up in bylaws as environmental considerations, prioritizing digital over printed, etc. This is an amendment process and adoption. That's about it. I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see if my video makes it wonky again. Todd, you have, is that okay, or is it breaking up again?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, yeah, it was the video, it's taking a lot. Todd, I see your hand.
Yeah, I would just say that Robert's rules really saves you when you have like disruptive members or very powerful individuals that want to sort of filibuster a meeting or whatever. So I think that it's important to have something like that in the bylaws. You don't necessarily have to follow them, but that they can be invoked because really it's the only way. It's a time-tested way to figure out how to herd cats, basically.
Yeah, Yeah, and there's like a dummies version. There's some great YouTube videos. You can use the main principles of Robert's Rules of Order. And they're really helpful when you think point of order and calling something to a vote or amending the amendment. Like there's some very specific procedures that are helpful to know. But I think it does get intimidating expecting neighborhood associations to absorb this giant rule book that was really developed for like parliaments of hundreds of people. Yeah, but clear rules are needed. We could do some kind of training if you haven't had one already on kind of the basics of good forming motions, coming to discussions, etc. Rob's rules. Okay, love it. Any other questions?
Todd?
I'm back. So in our bylaws, we have a registered office requirement that the registered office must be located within the boundaries of the district, which they're not now. We're using the NWNW office, so we're not in compliance there. But what is a registered office legally? What does that require?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is a registered agent for service. Your articles of incorporation in your annual report with the Secretary of State has all of your updated information. There's no statutory rule that you have your like principal place of business or anything in your bylaws. So, and your registered agent for service of process is who's going to sue you. Where can they go to deliver a paper? Where can they? And that right now, it sounds like it's NW. They go to Darlene and they serve her on your behalf. There's no requirement to have that in your bylaws. Is that what you mean, or registered office? I haven't heard that one.
Well, I think they meant registered agent, but that's what it says registered office in the document.
Yeah, I would just strike that. There's no need to add any complication in physical offices or anything, especially with so much moving towards remote anyway. Like where you conduct your business is irrelevant to the population that you're serving.
Yeah, I think there's a separate section that says we have to meet within the boundaries, which makes more sense, but maybe less sense now that you can just dial in on a computer or whatever.
Yeah, interesting. Any other questions?
None in the chat.
Okay, did I miss any in the chat?
I don't think
Oh, Gary,
so.
will somebody send out the new city standards and requirements when they are available? You bet. Send them to me too, because I've checked that website a lot.
Todd, another question?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, for the only standards, is that really a good idea to have in the bylaws? Because, you know, the neighborhood associations have been treated to varying degrees of applaud and dismay by the city. And I wouldn't want to have something in my bylaws that puts myself at the mercy of city direction. Let's put it that way.
Well, wait, what was the first part of that question or comment?
Is it smart to have an only standards section in the bylaws? Because then you're sort of at the mercy of the city.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is you are subject to the ONI standards, but it's kind of like saying, shall be subject to IRS rules or chapter 65. Like you already are. I don't know that you need, they want it in the template bylaws. I don't know that that's necessary. You have to comply with what you have to comply with.
I don't know that we have to comply. I mean, do we have to comply just because we're we're a city recognized neighborhood association? I mean, we're an independent corporate entity. How are we legally affected by the bylaws, by the ONI standards? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, they have, it's an extra layer of regulatory authority, right? You have to comply with the highest law of the land, federal law, IRS rules. You have to comply with the state laws, chapter 65. And of course, Portland is like, you also have to comply with these standards if you are a neighborhood association. Mostly because of the public meeting rules, I think. It's like a extension of quasi extension of the city, but that is an excellent question and certainly something to consider. And I hope when these
I would like to make a
Mhm.
comment on this too, because I think it's an excellent question. And especially now that the city is underfunding us so dramatically, I like to ponder, well, what would it be like if we were an independent nonprofit and received no money from the city? How would we be able to behave then? Would we have to comply with open meeting laws, for example?
Right. So the question really is, under what authority does ONI regulate? I love that. Yeah.
And I think, to a certain extent, I mean, at least for me, or the NWDA, I mean, we've been around. We were one of the first neighborhood associations, and we predate any of these, you know, groups or whatever. I understand they give us money, and they can control us that way, I would think.
And it's kind of, and they're saying if they recognize you as a neighborhood association meeting their criteria and you get services from them, then you have to comply. It's kind of like strings attached situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would sort of say it's like a hospital that accepts, Medicaid. Like you have to follow the rules, but if you decide not to accept the money, then not necessarily you don't really. But that's my understanding of it.
Is that true? If we didn't accept the money, would we have to comply with the rules of the ONI standards?
Well, I think there's a challenge that could be made to that. Yeah, I mean,
Going down a slippery slope there. Ooh.
But I think too. I think too. You have to explore.
Just take a mind ride.
Yep.
Not to say that would happen, but to explore
Right.
modes of leverage. Let's put it that way.
You
Well,
know,
I
if I may, just Stephanie, if I may, just to chirp in of my humble opinion, it's funny, we are serving the city and their neighborhoods, and so there's that sense, that obligation that of staying within the ONI standards, and originally it was set up where we had to, until otherwise noted. It just kind of seems to me that we're still on our original marching orders and compliance issues, as far as, those layers that Stephanie is talking about, starting with IRS and going down. I always see ONI as the right above us, the board members of the coalition. So
yeah, the city code, I would need to dig into that, or you guys can dig into it. City code title 3.96, kind of setting forth the authority. And if it says City of Portland shall have authority over recognize, in some way, I suppose that could be challenged. That's maybe a fight for another day, and if there is a good reason for it. But I do like the question. I haven't sat down with them. I think it's been hard to get an audience. I would love to be at the table with y'all when these standards are being updated, because they certainly need it.
Hey, Stephanie, we have a couple questions in the chat before we wrap. Should bylaw meetings be special meetings with special notice so they don't get overlooked? Can you still have open meeting laws, or you still have open meeting laws, don't you? I think that was in response
as
to
it stands, as
zoning.
the law is right now in the ONI standards, you are still subject to open meeting laws, whereas other nonprofits are not.
And that's committees as well, right? Committees have to abide by open meeting laws?
Yeah.
Committees and ad hoc committees, or just standing committees?
I don't know the answer to that. If they're not making any decision, I mean, I know if they are part of city government, then yes, any committee that is even deliberating needs to comply with public meeting laws. Yeah, Clara, yeah, I believe it's any committee. I agree. Should bylaw meeting be special meetings? Yeah, anytime well, I don't know about discussing the meetings, but yeah, anytime that bylaws are going to be amended at the neighborhood association level, needs to go by the process in your current bylaws, what that process is for amendment.
And Carol says, today we get other benefits from the city, for example, rights around land use appeals, information about our organizations, other websites, etc. If you don't want to be a recognized neighborhood, anyone can be an independent organization or nonprofit. If you want to be recognized by the city, it would be hard to ignore their standards.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thanks for articulating that, Carol. If you,
Yeah, good point.
yeah, if you want to fall within that realm, you know, it comes with those restrictions and responsibilities and public meeting rules. If you don't want to fall without, or maybe even just contract with them, that's certainly a possibility that could be entertained.
So I think that goes back to the original question that maybe shouldn't be in the bylaws then. So any standards that we'll follow those, because
Yeah.
I mean, it gives you more options, I would say.
Yeah, I think if you're silent as to that, you have to comply with the laws you have to comply with. Yeah.
And
or you can
Mary,
as applicable. Yeah.
and Mary, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, and I had put in the chat, if you are, let's say, as you were all saying, if you, I'll just use the word separate from the city as a, independent, not receiving funds from the city, then you are a nonprofit, then like, why would you have to comply with ONI standards or whatever is out there? And in terms of what Carol wrote about land use, appeals, notifications, etc., that's all state. That's not city, that's state. So that, the recognized organization, so that language you'd have to look at what the state has written there. The city's just kind of, piggybacking on that. It's all ORS. I don't know I can't remember, but yeah, I think that's something really somebody should be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody seriously wants to decouple from the neighborhood association structure while still being a neighborhood association, a nonprofit, you certainly have the right to do that. We, find somebody to look at it, do the analysis, make that argument. Any other, I like the discussion though.
I do too. I wish we had more of this discussion, actually, maybe another time, because I'm not sure anyone is really studying ONI standards at the Civic Life Office. So it'd really be interesting to kind of talk about that more in detail.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been updated since 2005. A whole lot's happened in the last 20 years. And so it's clearly not a priority with them. They did get a grant to update them, right? I don't know what happened.
No, they didn't. No.
I think they did. Let me just introduce Mary Jaren Kelly. She's with the city, but she runs North Portland Neighborhood Services, or she is the city staff person that works with the district association in North Portland with North Portland Neighborhood Services. And she has a long history in this work. So her wisdom is relevant here. And thank you for being here.
You bet. Yeah, thanks, Darlene. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know about I'm really in a conundrum. And all of this is leading from they're not funding us appropriately. I'm gonna have to find more funding. And so what if I find all the funding? And we don't, in the city's money is like icing on the cake, I guess. Other than their contractual obligations, I don't know what other contractual obligations we would have outside of you have to do this, 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 and this. And can they force us to do things like if we became an independent coalition of independent neighborhoods, would we have to maintain all of the archive documents at the city? Is that something we would maintain on our own? There's a lot of questions here, and all of it stems from the fact that we are being so grossly underfunded. I
Yeah,
have
and there's
other
that,
avenues.
yeah, there's that frustration point, right, where we're so frustrated, we're underfunded, this unfunded mandate. And the temptation obviously is to just walk away, or, you know, entertain the idea of walking away. And other possibilities are working within the current system, taking that leadership role in updating these standards so they really do serve the neighborhoods and serve the neighborhood associations and the district and the coalitions, you know, better. So there are options, and I always prefer to take these actions intentionally and not reactive in reaction, if possible. So I think
Yeah,
it's right for another day. And Darlene, I'm happy to sit with you and see who among the neighborhoods or the districts wants to. And I know you already are doing this, but specifically taking a leadership role in finding an ad hoc committee at the city level on who's doing these ONI updates, who's updating.
Nobody, and they say that they're not going to be dealt with until like next year. So we're stuck with these ONI standards for however long, and there so many of them are outdated. But we're probably not going to even begin to embark upon ONI standards until next fiscal year.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, I actually have a hard stop. I need to be somewhere in 10 minutes. So,
well, let's wrap this up then. I really appreciate everybody's questions.
Carl's going to kick us off here is what he's actually saying.
I know Zoom speak. Anybody have any questions? Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the discussion, thoughtfulness.
Let's do part 2.
Yeah, let's do part 2. Go back to your boards, work through that template, work through those questions and considerations, and come back for other questions. Thanks,
Darlene, this is Rob from Far Southwest. I just want to commend you guys for doing this. This is a perfect example of what the coalition can do in a great way, and it scales really well.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
And thank you, Stephanie. You're wonderful as usual.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody.
Our
Okay.
governance meeting went over like what, an hour almost, Stephanie, the last time when we had our governance meeting.
I know, I told you it was
Very
gonna be
interesting.
almost 3 hours, but we managed to squeeze it.
I promise a part 2 on the bylaws, but that means that you
Okay.
guys have to go back and rethink some things and with your own neighborhoods, and then we'll come back and try to get a final. And you'll have a lot more questions once you meet with your neighborhood association. Bye, Carl. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Good night, everyone.
Stephanie,
All right,
we appreciate you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.